Hey y'all, grown black folks talk. We're still out there because that other video was getting too long. I need to talk a little bit more about the far out world of strong boundaries. Now, this video begins roughly where the other video began, but I spent enough time defining it. Our ancestors were not allowed to have any boundaries because they were slaves, and chattel slaves, had no boundaries because to allow a human being a boundary is to allow them to be human, and they were treated as chattel animals. So, no, they were not allowed to have human boundaries. And we, their descendants. And by the way, if you happen to be listening from any other ethnic group, if you were born and your people came here poor in the United States, the same kinds of people at the same time who were if you were Irish or Italian or Central European or Southern European, if you were Catholic, and you came poor, if you were Jewish, you came poor. There were plenty of people, and if you were Native American or Chinese or Japanese that early, there were plenty of people who basically treated you exactly the same way, just less intensely because slavery is a little bit different from what you went through in terms of intensity. When I say a little bit, I'm understating it profoundly. But the same mindset was imposed on everyone not of a certain class. This is why when you were in school and you studied about feudalism, you learned about the kings, the lords, and the serfs. Well, serf is where we get the word servant from. That was one step above a slave, a chattel slave at that time. So the people who are the kings and the nobles have always had this attitude about anybody not them. So they transgressed everybody's boundaries because they could for thousands of years and their children, when they came to the United States, expected to be able to live exactly the same way and did. And to an extent, the men at the top of capitalism have assumed this position. So this goes to one of the things that, if you could resist someone with money, you are really having strong boundaries is kind of an oddity, particularly if you are a woman. But this is generalized, okay? Let's look at the first of these. I mean, and I talk about the African American community, but if you're from somewhere else, you will begin to see these patterns as well. Uh, Length of survival, that is longevity. People think that their being somewhere for a long time entitles them to privileges others do not have in terms of how they're entitled and how they get to look down on other people and how they get to treat other people who are newer. Now, we call this ageism as well. We see this across society, but in the African American community, this is especially difficult because we come out of a church environment. One of the hardest things my pastor, Kiva L. McNeil, has had to do, and he's now beginning his 10th year as pastor, is dealing with members who were dead wrong but had been there 50, 11 years. And see, what he would have to do is, see, in a Christian environment, this is the issue with that kind of behavior. And this is why a lot of what happened to the Black church is so sad. See, in our case, there is a code, and there it is behind you. We're supposed to understand how to treat people based on that book. The Bible says to the Christian, you're not the judge of anyone. God is the judge. The Bible says to the Christian, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. The Bible says as a Christian, Ephesians 4:32, and be ye kind to one another, tenderhearted, forgiving one another, even as God for Christ's sake has forgiven you. Ephesians 2:8 and 9, for by grace are ye saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, lest any man should boast. The Bible does not say y'all have sinned over there, y'all over there. No, it says all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. So nobody's better than anybody else. That's the code. Now there's a lot more to the code, obviously, because that's a big book, as you can tell. But people really struggle with the idea. I mean, it was this far out to them that longevity, basically surviving forward, because you have to think about it from the point of view of our ancestors. The average life of a slave was 7 years into adulthood. That's it. So longevity was seen as a blessing, obviously, but it did entitle you to certain things because you made it. Well, but that doesn't entitle you to treat other people like slaves. That's where the disconnect came in. Because again, we were denied the opportunity to recognize each other as human. We were trained to see each other as chattel also. So when you have removed a white plantation owner from the situation, you have not yet removed Carter G. Woodson. The miseducation of the American Negro talks about this. You have not yet removed the slave mindset from the slave. So we tend to get together and do the same things. And one of the things we do is we think longevity, even in an environment where there is a code of honor, quite extensive codes of honor. What does the Lord require? He has shown you, oh man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you but to do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God? Micah 6:8. There is a code. It's quite extensive. There's more than 10 commandments in this book, whether you're looking at the Old Testament or the New Testament. There is a code, but still, people think longevity is going to get them over that. And when you begin to put up a boundary against your elders, or people who have been doing whatever it is longer than you have, oh, this is about to be a problem. You're about to have that kind of boundary. People think they've known you forever and a day, and they think they can therefore do anything to you. When you decide at year whatever, for whatever decade you want, that you're not going to put, oh, this is going to be a problem because people are not used to it. So then there are, like I said, there are the impositions of longevity. This is a big one. It takes a very strong boundary in the African American community to hold that off. And then the person who talks the most about this is Dr. Tiazon Johnson of the Honest Report, and I believe Dr. Tommy Curry in The Mad Knot covers it. I have not actually read the book, but I know Dr. Tiazon Johnson has talked about this. John Henryism. John Henry, you know the story, steel driving man. He was the best steel driving man that there ever was, but he got tricked into getting into a contest with a man that had a mechanical tool and died. And the way Dr. Johnson talks about this is he talks about how it is that black men, good black men, are trying to work their way to a favor that they will never receive. Because the idea is you can't work your way to human respect among people that won't give it to you. It just can't be done. Now, Dr. Johnson is adjacent to the manosphere and spends a lot of time talking about how black women won't give black men that respect no matter how hard they work. That conversation is interesting from that perspective, since essentially black women are saying the same thing, but that also tells you John Henryism is a problem that goes back further than the issues we're having between black men and women. You know that no matter how hard a slave worked, the chances of him being what's called meritoriously manumitted were very small, as long as he was able to do that work. Why? Because it was more profitable for him to remain in that situation than it was for him to be freed. It was more profitable to whoever owned him. So no matter how hard he worked, he could not work himself to freedom. Black men and women built the fundamental capital, built cities, built homes, built towns, built roads, picked cotton, sugar, tobacco, made the money that made it worth their being in America. You know how much money that they're owed with interest? The money that they were owed is comparable to most of the US national debt. And yet it took a war to free them. The flip side of John Henryism, of course, though, is that there is a debt owed. And sometimes people come into your life expecting you to compensate them for what they can't get from somewhere else. Black men have asked this of black women for a very long time, that since America will not give them the respect that their labor historically has earned them, that we are supposed to tolerate their acting out, and we are supposed to tolerate their taking out their frustration on us and sometimes our children. This archetype was given to us by Tony Gaskins very recently, the suffer the wrong woman, knowing what her man was going through. And then there are some women who also think that because they do this and they do that, they do this and they do that, that they deserve to be able to then look down on a man. This is talked about in Dr. Johnson, the idea of the CompuServe, whereby a black woman of a certain ability level and a certain class level basically takes on a man as a servant that she can have sex with. So, and then you have the phenomenon of husband sons and son husbands, where black mothers and aunties and grandmothers do this to their sons. I have encountered all of these archetypes, actually. I have seen men used in this way. I have known men who were sons who were used in this way. So these archetypes do exist. This is the other reason why we try very hard not to condemn entire groups of people, because unfortunately, and as little as we like to look at it, and even though the numbers may be pretty much off in one direction according to the stats, there are individuals on either side of the black gender divide who are going through variations of exactly the same issues with the opposite gender. This is the problem. John Henryism is a problem. But thinking that you're entitled to something from someone based on what you did somewhere else is also overcommon. I hear men talk, well, men built civilization and men did this and y'all women don't have any appreciation. The question that comes with that, but okay, sir, I know how Hammurabi did that. I know that Nimrod / Marduk did this over here. I know Mansa Musa did this over here. I got that. I'm up on history. Is your name any one of these? And if you are that old, please tell me what your healthcare routine is, because I'm gonna need that. Because if you did that, but again, this goes back to something that I keep saying. We have to stop trauma bonding with our ancestors. We have to stop trying to wear a mantle that does not belong to us. We are genetically our ancestors because we come from our ancestors. Don't get me wrong, but we didn't do what they did. They did what they did. We have to stop that foolishness because it sets up situations where people think that because some man 100 years ago did X, and because black men did X 250 years ago, every single black man ought to be able to be entitled to have whatever it is he wants from every black woman, and vice versa. But here's the thing, when you start talking about that, when you start putting up boundaries based on the other side of John Henryism, particularly if you're a black woman with black men, this is a problem for people. They're not used to it. The suffer the wrong archetype is huge. And as I've talked about in a previous video, the savage woman is the second archetype, but the third archetype has really strong boundaries. I'll come back to that, but people are not ready for that. I'm not going to compensate you for what happened 250 years ago. That doesn't even make sense. People are not ready for that because, again, there are a lot of systems of injustice and there are a lot of systems of compensation. Again, the previous one, the imposition of longevity is like, I survived this system, that ought to entitle me to something. Well, either I did some work elsewhere and I'm looking for my compensation, or the people that I'm a part of did some work elsewhere. Where do I get to cash in on that? The imposition of John Henry or Jane Henriette, depending on what the situation may be. When you begin to refuse this, people get very, very, very confused. Okay, here's the most common one in a capitalist society: the imposition of money. When you cannot buy your way, when you don't care how much money someone has and how much material blessing they can shower on you, and you still up here like, nope. People don't understand that. People don't understand that. You don't care how famous they are and how much status they have, and you're just like, you still know. I hear men talking about this quite often. Well, if I was 6 foot whatever and I looked like such and I had this much money, I'll get back to 6 foot whatever. That's the other side, the imposition of being a genetic celebrity. But let's deal with money right now because we're in a capitalist society and people think that they can literally go out and buy women as slaves at this moment. Like, if I just had enough money, I could have all the women I want to do whatever I want to do with them anywhere in the world. A passport only costs $150. So if you're sitting up here ideating about getting a passport, that already tells me you ain't got it, player. I already know you ain't got it. And if you do have $150 and you still can't get one, then that tells me you ain't got it because that child support ain't paid. Or there's felonies back there. At some former period, you didn't have it, and now that's in your way. But at some point, you did not know how money worked. Passport's $150. Keep a clean record. It's easy to get. I have one. I know. But at some point, we're going to be able to go offshore and use what won't work here and go upstairs and get us some humble, sweet little girl in some other country. Well, yeah, you're going to go there and try to buy something out, try to buy someone over there. The imposition of money. And then it is shocking. It is always incredibly shocking when people that think their money entitles them to buy slaves elsewhere to buy respect elsewhere, still can't get it. And then that goes hand in hand with the genetic celebrity. The genetic celebrity is the one who looks like whatever the flavor of the month is. And I get so tired of hearing men talk about, well, if only I was 6 foot, whatever, and I was athlete or something like that, I could get the women that I wanted. Women, if only I looked like Megan Thee Stallion or Beyonce, whoever it was, I could get the man that I wanted. No, both sets of people forget something. Good looks attract, but personality and kindness and fairness is what keeps. You look at people that have successful marriages, most of them don't look like genetic celebrities. And if you look at the lives of people who were considered the beautiful people, most of them struggled to stay married. It does happen. It does happen, but most of them struggle because the thing is, what you need to get is a life. Get a personality. Learn how to treat people with honor. Learn how to honor their humanity and see what happens for you. When you begin to say no to the genetic celebrities and the people with money and the people who are trying to work their way into everything and the people who have been around and survived, when you turn off all four impositions, and then if you get past all four impositions, now you warmed up for the big one. But we're family. The imposition of family members. This is the fifth. This is y'all talk about. We talk about touching the third rail. No, see, you touch the third rail, you get electrocuted. This is the heresy rail. Okay. The imposition of family members who are just out of control. I have lived long enough to have seen many times that sometimes blood ain't about nothing. I'm not talking about my family. I'm not talking about your family. I'm just saying I've seen this enough times. Because family is made up of human beings. And some people, human beings, have chosen to be on the grift train. Other human beings have decided to pick something artificial so they can feel superior to someone else. And we live in a country in which feeling superior and being a grifter combined is common. See again the history of slavery. You superior, but the minute you don't have slaves, your whole economy collapses. So you have a superiority complex, but you're really a grifter on Africa and Native America, where you got all that land from, who saved some of your associates' butts in 1620, and y'all repaid them like what now? Yeah. So it's not uncommon to meet people who at the same time are going to grift from you, are going to suck you dry, and feel entitled to do it and that you should be happy. And some of these people in your family. That is the fifth imposition. And for most people, it is the first and the last. It does not matter whether the person thinks because they've been in a particular place for a long time. It does not matter whether people think that their work should finally be recognized to the extent that it should be recognized and it should be recognized by you. It does not matter whether it's their money or their good looks or their family relationships. The problem is you will be confronting people who do not understand the dignity of anyone's humanity, including their own. So they are trying to prop it up artificially at your expense. And the thing about strong boundaries is because we don't do well with strong boundaries, when you begin to practice strong boundaries against these five major impositions, people are going to definitely be of the mind of not understanding. People are going to tell you this is unfair. People are going to tell you that you're doing too much. But do you know that everyone who breaks out of a situation of not having what they need, gets a little something, and continues to move on, has to have strong boundaries? One of the things that makes African American businesses struggle so hard is as soon as family members know that someone is doing a little better, there is this expectation that whoever it is, and why African American women struggle to build wealth, It's whoever it is that he, if so and so come up, we all gonna come up. It takes really strong boundaries, and sometimes that to keeping those strong boundaries requires somebody to move. Athletes go through this. People feel like because they've known these athletes forever and that they came to a game and cheered and all the rest, that when this athlete gets $1 million, all their cousins and friends and all the rest suddenly have a business idea that they want this person to finance and fund. They don't necessarily know any more about doing business than anybody else, but they have lived their entire life waiting on someone else to let them grift, waiting on someone else to provide them. Meanwhile, we in the 21st century, opportunities flying by you every single day. I'm about to take on project number 2 to get published in January, or at least to submit for publication. 8 to 10 cents a word. Now, I don't know if I'm going to get it, but the point is the opportunity is there. I'm still working on learning my ad stacks and things like that. I picked up a lot. I haven't made many sales, but I picked up a lot of information about what works and what doesn't and why, and what mistakes I've made and what I need to clean up next time out. This is all available. I gotta go on January 2nd and look in to see if we can do some things. And even though San Francisco should be a difficult market, maybe not. We'll see. There's a lot of opportunity out there for people with skills, but instead, everybody's lining up waiting on someone else to use their skills and have the discipline to build themselves and to put something in their hand so they can make their dreams come true with a minimal amount of effort. Strong boundaries can be dangerous in an environment like that. But here's the thing, if you do not want to be treated as a slave, you have to do what our ancestors had to get free to do. In order for any of our ancestors to be able to have human dignity, to have the boundaries necessary to human dignity, to have control of their own time, to have control of their own labor, to have control over who had the use of their body, to have control over not being subject to violence, they had to, at this time of year, follow the drinking gourd, follow that North Star. Everybody was a couple days, would have been Christmas, and everybody's gonna be out here drinking and having a good time, and slaves gonna get a couple days off, and it was time to get up and move. Our ancestors had to follow the drinking gold. They had to behold that star. They had to go tell it on the mountain and get over some mountains, over the rivers, through the woods, over that Ohio River, past the Mason-Dixon line. When they passed the Fugitive Slave Act, they had to keep on going. They had to go through Ohio, and then they had to go up through Illinois, and then they had to go up through Wisconsin, and they had to get to Canada. So in order to be human, sometimes having strong boundaries means changing your location. But before you can get to where you're ready to do that, you have to establish in yourself that you will not be imposed on by longevity. It does not matter if these people have been in your life 50, 11 years. If they're wrong, they're wrong. If they don't respect your humanity, they're wrong. You need to keep them outside. If they think that because they've done a lot of work for someone else, or they've done a lot of work around you, or even if they have done a lot of work for you and with you, does that mean they get to hang around when they don't respect your humanity? No, they do not. Doesn't matter how much money they have to put into the situation. It doesn't matter how cute you think they are. That's a hard one because, we're biologically wired for certain things. That person is not the only attractive person that you will meet in the world. Do you know that it's possible to be around attractive people who actually would treat you like a human being and that you do not have to give those two things up in a world with 8 billion people in it? Do you know that there's one of those people that will find you attractive? You just have to do the work to get into rooms of honor so you can be with people who actually know how to treat you right. And then finally, family members. Okay, I know that their blood ain't got nothing to do with nothing. Blood will kill you. Now, that's not everybody's experience, but I've talked to people that have had their moms, their dads, their sisters, their brothers, their uncles do unspeakable things to them. And if they had not built up the strength within themselves to get away, they wouldn't have survived. Many of them are in therapy now struggling with thoughts of suicide because of what family did to them. The fifth wall is sometimes actually wall number 1, depending on when the mess started. But people who are powerful people who get things done in the world and leave a legacy that is worth leaving, an honorable legacy, they have strong boundaries. You cannot you cannot carry all these people who are grifters wanting to be up over you As it was said once, you cannot get out from under a person until you get out from under a person. You cannot carry all these people. So you have to train your mind. If you don't know how to treat me with human dignity, I don't care how long you've been in my life. I don't care. Uh, I don't care how long. I don't care how hard you think you've worked. I don't care how much money you have. I don't care what you look like and how sexually attractive I may think you are. And I don't care if we're related. I got to go. And if I can't figure out how I go, I got to figure out how you go. Legally, y'all don't get, because here's the thing. There are people who are out there doing this 21 times, 29 times a day. Legally, y'all. We're not talking about removing anybody from the planet. But see, men are a little bit different about this. Men feel like if you don't respect them, you need to be gone. And I don't recommend the violent aspect of this, but we take some of this for what it is. My sister says all the time, Lord, remove the problem and remove me from the problem. So you put it in the Lord's hands, that's a whole different situation. But the idea is you do not continue to give your time, energy, access, attention, and emotional resources, to say nothing of your physical and financial resources, to people who don't know how to treat you like a human being. Even Joseph Stalin once said, and perhaps he did not know how ironic he was being, there must be minimum moral standards between nations. He was so mad that Hitler betrayed him. And I'm just sitting up here like, Mr. Stalin, really? But even Joseph Stalin understood it. But see, there are a lot of people who don't understand it. Like I said before, there are a lot of people who don't understand it until they are the victim of it. In other words, they don't care about how unfair they're behaving until it happens to them. They don't get the idea. They will never get it watching how you're suffering. They're only going to understand it when it happens to them. Well, if they don't understand it relative to you, then they don't, what happens to them afterwards, you need to get away from them, because that's what I'm talking. There are people in this world who can do the most heinous, unspeakable things to other people, but only when they do not understand the damage. They don't. It's a combination, I think, because they don't have. If you look up psychopaths, well, not psychopaths, but sociopaths do not fully understand because they are not fully connected with their own emotions. They are not fully connected with themselves. They don't necessarily understand the damage that they're doing completely. And then the second part of that, the psychopath does not care. They have pleasure. So if you get some combination of someone like this, the narcissist has traits of both. He can be on one side or another. She can be on one side or another. You can be dealing with people. But see, it doesn't make any difference. It's like I talked about the George W. Bush rule 20 years ago. I was in my 20s when George W. Bush was in office. And before I left college, I had formulated something called the George W. Bush rule. At a certain point, it does not matter whether he intentionally set up a situation to displace, to cause 100,000 Iraqis to be killed and 2 million to be displaced over some weapons of mass destruction that didn't the weapons of mass destruction that never existed. It does not matter whether he meant to do it or he didn't care or he didn't know any better or he was deceived himself. At a certain point, it no longer matters. The damage has been done. We also can call this the steamroller parked on the hill in San Francisco. If whether you meant to run that thing down the hill or you left it without turning the wheel to the curb, if I'm at the bottom of the hill at Fillmore and Gary, and you let that thing roll down from Fillmore and Jackson, whatever the cause is, I'm dead. Doesn't matter. It does not matter whether someone does not understand or whether they are intentionally not caring about breaking through your boundaries and treating you as a slave. It does not matter whether they understand it or not. You have to hold those boundaries, including removing removing them from your life or removing yourself from their life, because you were not put here to be a no boundary having slave. And if that other person doesn't understand it or doesn't think you understand it enough to get away, it's irrelevant. It's irrelevant. How do you want to live in 2023? I talked in the previous video about rooms of honor, living in building rooms of honor. If that's what you want, you're going to have to learn to have strong boundaries. Is everybody going to understand? No. Are people going to feel like you treated them unfairly? Yes, they are. Because they're not used to the idea that no, I don't exist for you to do what you want and not care about hurting me in the process. You may not be used to not being able to use up people at your expense for whatever it is you feel you need in the world. That's not my problem. And if you pay attention to me, y'all understand that some people know me as the nacho dealer because it's not your problem either. As soon as you begin to build these strong boundaries, I got the pico de gallo, I got the nacho cheese, and I got your chips over here for you. You got to make people like that not your problem. Because if you remember anything about the history of what our ancestors went through, people will use you up. So you have to develop, you have to get over the imposition of longevity, you have to get over the imposition of, oh, I did all this and I did all that. You have to get over the imposition of money, you have to get over the imposition of attractiveness, and you definitely have to get over the imposition of family. These big five, and there are combinations and variations and other things, and we're going to just look at the big five. Do you want to live? Do you want to be free in 2023? Then you're going to need to have strong boundaries. Because it's in essence, you got two choices with the kind of situations that we're going in, and the way the majority of people either want to grift or put you down and lift themselves up, or both. You either can make them disappear or let them do it to you long term. Those are the choices that you have. That's it. That's all. Make up your mind what you want in 2023. And if you want to be someone who is able to find those rooms of honor and build those rooms of honor, then you've got to keep dishonor out of your space. And it is dishonorable to take advantage of people because you've been there longer. It is dishonorable to take advantage of people because you think your work entitles you to be able to do that. It is dishonorable to take advantage of people because you have more money. It's dishonorable to take advantage of people because you think you're so attractive you can do that. It's dishonorable to take advantage of your family members. And if you are around people like this, understand that they need to be dishonorably discharged from your life. And get to kicking. Or if the situation require, get to running. It's time to feet don't fail me now. Cause look, y'all, it's getting see, if this recession gets real, the life that you save by having strong boundaries now and getting yourself some space from certain people will be your own. Trust and believe on that. Again, this is not pleasant conversation. But see, I've already done the videos about the kind of people you need to exit from your life. This is another version of the same thing. I did the positive video first, talking about what's available to you once you've done that. Finding rooms where you won't have to run and hide. Finding rooms where you will not always have to be kicking. But in order to get from where some of you are to get into that, you must establish strong boundaries. And what other people think about that is not your problem. I'll meet you with some corn chips, some cheese, whatever, the meat or vegetarian alternative of your choice, and some pico de gallo on the other side. Understand it is not your problem and get those boundaries up. All right. Thank you for listening. Again, another long thought journey. So if you've gone this far with me, I appreciate it. Thanks for listening and have a good day now. Goodbye.